And I think all the attendees had a little bit of a break a little while ago. So I know they're coming back in very slowly after getting their drinks and their eats, because I know it's almost the end of the day. Well, it's starting on your side now.
Yeah, it's the
Rafe.
start of the day for me.
And
It's definitely now starting.
what time is it, Jorge? What time is it, Geronimo? Sorry.
10:30 here.
10:30.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got the different time zones again. Yep, always good to have that.
And 6:30, Pep, at 6:30 where you are.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, 6:30.
God.
Where's your coffee?
Yeah.
There you go.
That's a two
Please,
cup.
I wouldn't have survived my last session without it. It would have been completely incoherent.
Oh my gosh, that's probably a third cup right now. It's just going down on it. So I'm gonna give them a little bit of time to just get in, but I know that we've had so many amazing conversations throughout the entire day. Like, Rafe, you have to definitely go back in, check out some of the webinars that we've done.
Yeah, definitely.
A lot of good content. And Geronimo, any content that you need to get, like, you should definitely check it out.
Oh, it's so
So,
beautiful to have a Spanish track this year.
yes,
It was good.
it was
It was
good.
good.
And
So the first time that I worked with AI that helped me to translate from Spanish to English and with captions. So it worked
wow.
75%. There was a lot of words that the AI didn't recognize very well, but I was amazed. I was surprised.
Yeah.
The improvement.
It's really good
appreciate
for
that.
conversational talk, right? As soon as you start to get a little bit technical, it kind of freaks out a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
yeah, it's pretty amazing what it can do.
Oh boy.
It
So
is indeed.
I'm gonna go ahead and start, but I appreciated you doing English subtitles. Just saying. I really appreciated that.
Thank
So we're
you.
on to our last panel of the day. This is the star-studded cast. All of the celebrities in here. So I'm just gonna introduce our celebrities a little bit. So we have, to my left, we have Pep, also known as Rafe Britton, from Lubrication Experts, just in case y'all have a little double ganger going on there. We have Jurgen Klopp, who is managing the Liverpool football team, but it may be Greg Livingstone from Fluitec, totally not sure here anymore. We also have Geronimo, also known as Jorge Alarcon from Polaris Labs. So it's an amazing panel that we have here, and this all-star team, is going to be talking all about how can sustainable lubrication practices be implemented in the manufacturing industry. So it is something that we are trying to do a lot more of. Like, we're trying to be more sustainable. We're trying to reduce that footprint. And lubricants, it just seems like a no-brainer. Lubricants is where it starts in any reliability section. So we want to start over there. How can you actually have a sustainable practice when it comes to lubrication? So I'm going to go around this way. So I'm going to Pep first, because Pep is an expert in terms of sustainability. What does sustainability mean to you in terms of the lubrication industry? I know you had a session just a little while ago, so I want you to help us out with that.
Yeah, so I think like in manufacturing, at a very basic level, the way that I would look at it is how do you do more with what you have already? I think for a lot of businesses, from the first step, you could completely overhaul your entire lubrication program to go to bio-based lubes and try recycling and all this kind of stuff. But just as a first step, I think the way that it's easy to think about it is doing more with what you already have, and that sort of then speaks to what kind of low hanging fruit is our facility not already engaging in. So some of the basics, like are we filtering the lubricants correctly so that we can extend their use? Are we treating them correctly? Is there any way that we can lower bulk oil temperatures? Are we doing enough, root cause failure analysis? Something that Sanya has spoken about a lot, for example, would be the microdieseling effect that I think is maybe more common in hydraulic and compressor applications than people realize, and that obviously loads up your oil with oxidation products and soot and that. So I think a lot of that is sort of the low-hanging fruit that we can use to become more sustainable. And then once we've taken that first step, then I think there's a whole range of really more exciting and more innovative technologies that we can kind of bring to bear.
Oh boy, I'm gonna have to pass it over to our Liverpool manager there. Tell us a little bit more about sustainability and lubrication. I know this is your area of expertise.
I'm sorry, do you say me next?
Yeah, well, it depends. It depends.
Okay.
You can pretend to be Greg for a little time.
Well, so I always think of the definition that the UN wrote, I don't know, in the 80s on sustainability, which basically is the ability to meet the needs of the present without compromising the future generations to be able to meet their needs. And so if you bring that very high level definition down to lubrication, we have a need to lubricate machines, and we will for the foreseeable future. I don't know, maybe the next 50, 100 years. It's hard to imagine manufacturing generating, making different chemicals and refining lubricant or refining oils. It's hard to imagine any of these processes taking place without lubricants. So then what can we do to basically make lubrication last as long as we can and make it as sustainable as possible? And I think that Rafe did a really nice job in the last session of kind of summarizing some of the key points. But from our perspective at Fluitec, what we did a life cycle assessment, and we looked at the carbon intensity of lubricant from extracting it out of the ground, refining it, and manufacturing, packaging, shipping it, using it, and actually the biggest carbon footprint of a lubricant is actually at the very end of its life. And in most cases around the world today, unfortunately, a lot of people are still incinerating lubricants, and that consumes more carbon than everything else put together. So our focus has really been, what can we do to try to extend and maximize the life of the lubricant?
All right, I'm passing it over to Geronimo. All yours.
So from my point of view and based on my experience, I've been doing audits, lubrication audits from Central Asia to Europe, North Africa, the US, and in South America. So the sustainability lubrication practices, from my point of view, is directly proportional to the cost of the liter of oil. And how much a liter of oil costs in your country? Probably, I don't know, from 7 to, I don't know, 10, 20 bucks, right? No more than that. But in the third development countries, a liter of oil will probably cost the same, but it will take 6 months to get to the operation, to the plant. So when you have that type of problems, and when you receive your drum of oil, it's pure gold what you have in your hands. And trust me, I've been in these mining operations where there's a lot of issues, political and economical issues. When they receive that drum, you understand how much that value for that drum for that people. So sustainability lubrication practices are directly proportional directly to the cost of the oil. And I'm not talking only about the price, but everything that is involved in that cost. So, and I've seen this only in poor countries. So first development countries, I mean, first world countries, they don't suffer these kind of things. They just, I've been in a site a couple of years ago, they dispose about 29% of their oil, and it was in good conditions, but they didn't care. Right, so that is not a good practice. We are not minimizing the impact of the environmental in that situation, right?
Mhm. Yeah, and like we see it's a lot. I'm just gonna jump in terms of the Caribbean, because we have shipping issues. Not all of the lubricants are blended in the country or in the Caribbean. You're either getting stuff out of the US or the UK. So, and it kind of comes back to the session we had with Ryan earlier, where he spoke about what we have going on in the maintenance industry. We're still suffering from shipping issues. We're still having some of those issues and those challenges still come up. And for the countries that I want to say cannot afford it, they really have to treat the oil like gold. And some of them still don't understand the meaning of it, because the value involved for that particular drum of oil, it's a lot more than what you actually pay for it. Because if you factor in your shipping, your handling, your everything else, like Greg mentioned before, the life cycle analysis, the cost of the lubricants is a lot more than what you think you're paying for. So even though, and I'm just jumping a little bit here, if you talk about purchasing lubricant from the price point of this is what it's selling at, or you have a cheaper lubricant, like it doesn't equate to that price eventually. And if you pull that back to the sustainability level, your equipment is going down, it's not being lubricated properly, poor habits, contamination, all of that goes into the cost of the lubricants. And even trying to make it sustainable, because at the end of the day, you want to try and make your oils part of your assets in your plants. Because if you treat it like a consumable, then it's going to be thrown away just as quickly as Geronimo was saying earlier before. So they don't take they don't understand the importance of it and what it can do in terms of the effects on the actual environment. So sustainability is something that we're still trying to you know, get people to be more aligned with. And it starts with these sessions. And I know Dugard is, asking a question. Do you think that there's something to add to the academic curriculum to improve lubrication practices in the manufacturing industry? There's a lot of things that we need to add to the academic curriculum, but that one may have to be something that we implement at a employee standpoint, because during like even for me during the academic period, I wasn't aware about lubrication and reliability practices. So I think it may be only something that we can do when we get into the workplace. I'm going to pass it over to Pep. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was just going to say one thing. So this is something we've actually been thinking about at the Australian Lubricants Association, which is, we kind of relatively newly formed. It's like the equivalent of ILMA over in the US. And it's a lot about how do you recruit people into the industry. So kind of like what I talked about in my earlier session is about this golden generation retiring and how do you replace them and attract younger people into the industry. I think one part of that is awareness. Right, like you, I went through my entire mechanical engineering degree, never once hearing about lubricants, and so there was zero awareness. And so we're looking at ways of how do you get involved in, not necessarily having to develop a curriculum, but at least going to some universities and saying, "Can I do a guest lecturing session?" Just one session where we can make people aware of the impact of lubricants and maybe sow the seeds that this is an industry that people would want to work in, and because if you don't have people in the industry, you don't have anyone to teach.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the areas where we can probably insert ourselves is, not everyone has an Auburn University or a, University of California, Merced, where there is a tribology program. That's reasonably rare. but certainly just building that a little bit of awareness, I think would help.
Yeah. Jürgen, on to you. Any
Um,
thoughts on that?
yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think there are some examples of some very, very good schools. But it's really at the master's and PhD level, and it's really in the the branches of mechanical engineering, and people will dive into tribology and from that perspective. But from a chemistry perspective, there's very, very little that and normal academics on that study lubricants. And at the undergrad level, I'm not aware of any schools that even touch the subject. I don't know anybody in our industry that went to school thinking, man, when I graduate, I want to be a lube engineer. Like there
Oh,
is some,
yeah.
but I've not met them yet. So, but so awareness is a huge thing.
Passing it over to Geronimo.
Yeah, so for a couple of years, I've been teaching an elective subject here in a master's degree in the north part of Spain. It was lubrication awareness, basically. So, and these people were ready to go to take their first job, right? So they don't have any clue about lubrication, nothing about what a lubricant is, not even how does grease or an oil works. So, and we are talking about here that a lot of people is taking this type
Oh,
of
okay.
subjects, right? In mechanical about lubrication or lubricants, and it is the base to build a really good maintenance management program, right? So there's something I wouldn't say that there's something wrong, but there's a lot that probably we can contribute, right? As you mentioned, Pep, that we can go to a university and say maybe I would like to help these people, right? Because the industry is completely different than the room that you are in right now. So it's very
Mhm.
important. And I
Oh,
think it
yeah.
depends on us.
Oh, yes. I love that answer. It definitely depends on us. We have to influence the future generation here. Now, Vanda has a very important question, and I'll just sort of summarize it a bit. She's talking about the fact that when fresh oil is delivered to a company, most of the times you have to filter it because it has a different particle count or it may not be the required cleanliness, especially for hydraulic oils or even turbines. She's thinking that it may be a waste of time and resources for the end user because now the end user has to put that, filtration in place, all of these things, and it adds to their carbon footprint. What are your thoughts on having lubricants available pre-filtered from your global supplier, ready to use straight onto your plants so that it helps reduce carbon footprints from the smaller plants who have to, do all of these extra things? So that's a really good question, Vanda. Thank you for staying up and joining us for this because I know you're in Qatar.
Well, so I think is a really, really good question. The whole premise of pre-filtering the oil and making the delivering nice clean oil makes a lot of sense in theory. In practice, a challenge is that I'm not aware of any lubricants that are manufactured that are like hydraulic or turbine or compressor oils that are not filtered. I mean, they're manufactured and they're filtered, and they usually have very, very low particle counts. But then once you put it into packages and you drum the product, you ship the product. There are so many things that are outside of the lubricant manufacturer's control before it actually gets to the end user that I think that's the challenge. And so there's a lubricant manufacturer in the US that guarantees that their oil meets a certain ISO code when the client uses the oil. And in most cases, that oil is filtered on site to be able to meet that because it's so hard to eliminate all of the other sources of contaminating aggression along the way. Um, so it's a really good question, but it is also a challenge, I think, to be able to deliver super clean oil consistently.
Oh yeah. I'm dropping it
Maybe,
over to
maybe
Pep. Yeah.
so I was going to say maybe one other way of looking at it is why, look at the reasons for why the oil companies don't do it. So let's say, for example, you're making a hydraulic oil. I think that the problem with delivering to a certain cleanliness spec is, from a manufacturer's standpoint, who are you filtering for? Because the industries that hydraulic oil is going into, if I go out to a quarry here in New South Wales, I mean, these guys just basically spill hydraulic oil on the ground for fun, right? It's kind of like that scene in Zoolander where they're sort of spraying the oil everywhere. That's
Hmm.
more or less what it looks like. Versus, let's say, plastic injection molding, where they're demanding a very, very high level of cleanliness. So who are you trying to market your lubricant at? So if you filter at the plant, you have to kind of go to the lowest common denominator, which is the plastic injection molding, which means that in a lot of respects, you are wasting time and energy in manufacturing for the product that's going to go to the guy that just spills it on the ground. So it doesn't really make sense for the manufacturers to do that, to cater to a wide range of different customers. It makes more sense for them to just say, look, we deliver it how we deliver it, and you clean it up to the cleanliness code that you require. Now, having said that, I do think maybe a slightly more efficient way of doing it is that, I don't know what it's like in the US, but certainly here in Australia, there are entire companies that are just dedicated to doing pre-filtration of lubricants. And so you can actually get your manufacturer to, for example, deliver product to those facilities where they will pre-filter it and certify it for you before sending it out to site. So that's maybe another way of skinning the cat.
Oh, good. Geronimo, up to you.
So the first thing that the site needs to understand is the why, right? Why do they need a clean lubricant? And that is the first wall. If the decision maker doesn't understand why, that's it. You can offer anything, but they will not buy it, right? So after they understand why, there are two options. They can do it yourself, or they can do it themselves, or they can pay X amount of cents per liter. So they will hire someone else to do it. And what I found, especially here in Europe, is that people prefer to pay a little bit more per liter so someone will do it for them. What I found in the States, it's a little bit different. They prefer to invest in equipment so they can filter their oil, right? And what I found in South America, for example, is that they prefer to filter their oil, and they will build their own filters, right? So there's a lot of different situations, but the first wall is to understand why. Try to explain that the reason why they need that clean oil.
Oh yeah. And it definitely varies. And depending on the region that you're in, I love the fact that you brought in the fact that in South America we can, you know, innovate a lot, innovate a lot to get the costs down, but making sure that we get the job done as well. So I think it really goes back to what resources are available. Because there a lot of times that in, I would say, Caribbean islands, we may not have the resources available. Like, it's not an option for us to do certain things. So we may be a bit limited in certain aspects. But I know we have Vanda is jumping in here and she's talking about in Qatar that they have a mix between the third party performing the filtration or the end user having a filtration skid dedicated to this type of activity. And yes, definitely, because there are some companies who it makes sense for them to invest in a filtration skid. But for the guy that has two pieces of equipment, it may not make as much sense for him because he's not using it as much. So depends on your circumstance, depends on your resources, depends on how everything fits together. So I'm gonna just go around the panel one more time and ask the very important question because we talked about, particle filtration, getting that sorted out. Now, Ahmed had a question about if we can what about using biodegradable lubricants as the future? of lubricants, to help with reducing emissions and pollution. So I'm going to pass it over to Pep for this one, because I figure he may have covered something like that in his session a little bit earlier, but on to you.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really exciting area of innovation, so to speak. I think we're probably a little ways away from it becoming mainstream, but if you go to any of the industry events, you'll see quite a pretty broad range of smaller startup companies that are working on this problem. So biosynthetic technologies have their esterides. We have V-Base, for example, with their novel hybrid esters. And there's a handful of other companies that are doing similar work for how do you create lubricants from biosources. The good thing about these is that, traditionally, a lot of the biodegradable lubricants have been based on ester technology. Esters tend to be susceptible to hydrolysis in the presence of water. And some of these companies have been able to more or less solve that issue. Biosynthetic technologies does it through steric hindrance, and there's a range of different technologies. I think the challenge that we're going to have to adoption is more it's more a marketing exercise and a scaling exercise. So a lot of these guys have only so far built small pilot plants that are not really designed for the kind of mass production that we see in the base oil refining facilities. So that's one challenge that we've got to overcome, is sheer scale. And then the other one is the perception that bio-based lubricants are of like inferior quality. And that often comes from people's experience having used, up until this point, EALs kind of go one or the other direction, right? It's either they're full synthetics that perform really well, or they're vegetable oils that just, fall apart at the drop of a hat. And often people will pick the cheaper option, and that sort of tarnishes the industry. So I think that's kind of the challenge that we probably have.
All right, over to you again.
That was really well said. I don't know if I have a lot to add from that. I do see the irony in having a vegetable-based oil that is designed to break down when it gets in the environment, but literally breaks down as soon as you put it in a piece of equipment. So we do have a lot to overcome with that, but I would agree with Rafe that there are some really, really encouraging, there's a lot of encouraging research in this area. There's if you can use a bio-based lubricant, in many cases, you can actually have a lubricant with a negative carbon footprint. That being said, there's never value in using it unless it actually can provide value in your operation. So if you start with a carbon negative oil, but it causes all sorts of maintenance headaches, then you're in a much worse situation than not. So, but so not much more to add than what Rafe said.
And Geronimo.
I had a couple of experiences with this type of with vegetables oil, basically in the wind turbine industry. So the first thing that I can say is that you can smell the typical French fry smell from about a mile ahead, right? So the smell is very, very, very stinky. So if you compare that against a mineral oil, for example, the performance is less than 20%. So, and we are talking about a big gearbox that it's working about 54, no more than 60 Celsius. So it's not too much for an oil. So I'm not sure if we are going to see this type of fluids in the industry in the near future. Probably in, I don't know, 20 years when the technology gets better. But I'm not sure. I think we're going to see more improvements in things like ionic fluids, for example, things like that we're going to see more of those that are biodegradable type of fluids.
And just jumping in on that, Breno actually, he asked us a question about what do you think about the no oil lubrication, like magnetic and aerostatic bearings? Do you think that this is potentially the future of non-lubrication? I have to say non-lubrication. So I'm gonna go with, go ahead.
I know that, in gearboxes and wind turbines, for example, that's been the promise for years that you can have a gearless wind turbine. But really, I think a lot of manufacturers have tried this. It increases the costs, and typically you're not looking, it wouldn't make sense to have a wind turbine with to make that without a gearbox unless you're 15 megawatts and higher. I think that's the study that Siemens came out with. So, and having magnetic bearings as well, the promise of this is really, it's very interesting to have almost a frictionless bearing, where you don't need lubrication. I think it's also quite expensive to be able to build that. So I think that's one of the constraints.
Okay. Yeah. Anything from you, Pep, on that?
Yeah, I mean, totally agree. I mean, there's certainly going to be some applications for it, and I've seen these kind of things being advertised in mills for the mining industry as well. Number one is the expense. Number two, I think it's hard to envision a future. I mean, maybe it is in the far future where all the different lubrication points are replaced by these kind of applications. So when you look at something like the small food manufacturing industry, where you've got 1,000 different electric motors driving conveyor systems, does it make sense to have each of one of those being a magnetic bearing? I don't know what the answer is there.
Yeah. And Geronimo, final thoughts for you on
Yeah,
that
so
one.
cost is the main issue here. I've seen a couple of these technology in bench tests, not in the real machine. So I don't know. I don't think we're gonna see these in the near future yet. We are a couple of years behind
Couple of
that.
years out.
Yes, because of price, it's really expensive.
Yeah.
Really expensive.
It is. So we are coming to the end of our session. I know Dugard had a question about if some equipment by design, they are favorable to lubricant spillage during maintenance operations. Do you think that a kind of a label can be put into place to rate the capacity of the equipment to limit lubricant spillage? I think that's an OEM question for that one. So we may not be able to get to that fully, but what we want to do is check the OEM, but also be aware of your limits, because I know in certain environments you have a limit on the amount of lubricant spillage as you can and cannot have. So that would be my short answer to that, because I know we're supposed to end at 5 p.m. and we're 3 minutes. I say 5 p.m., but for Rafe, it's early in the morning. And sorry, for Pep, it's early in the morning. And for Geronimo, it's 10:30 in the night. So I want to thank everybody for staying with us for the entire day, going through the different sessions. Like, we loved having all of you with us. I want to just quickly check the leaderboard, because I know we had some very strong contestants, and our LRVSs are so competitive. I have Breno actually being at the top with 2175 points. Let me actually just share my screen very quickly.
Good job. Good job.
Good job, Breno. You did it. So we have Breno at the top. We have Ahmed coming in right after. Dugard at number 3. Kevin at number 4. Gerald Stalters at number 5. Joaquin at number 6. I'm calling on the top 10. Kaylee, number 7. Chloe at number 8. Vanda at number 9. And Jose at number 10. So those are our top 10 winners. But I'm so proud of all of you for going through the different stages of the leaderboard and participating in everything that we had today. So I want to thank everybody for attending LRVS, for attending the sessions, for ditching your meetings and, staying hanging out with us instead. I really appreciate those for sure. And I want to thank you for just being with us for this entire day. So thank you to our celebrity panelists. You know, this is the most famous panel that we had for the day. So especially
Sanya, I just want to say that, first, I love that we all had nicknames here because every time you called us out, I smiled. But your nickname is perfect because you literally were a Wonder Woman to put this conference on. You did a phenomenal job. So thank you
right.
so much.
Yes.
Amazing.
I just need to get my invisible airplane and we're good to go. Thank you to our sponsors as well. All of our attendees, Pep, Jorgen, Geronimo. I loved being on this panel. It was an amazing panel. So all of the different sessions that we had today, they're going to be available on the platform to watch on demand. And you all will be getting some more information from us. Look out for LRVS EMEA in the European time zone. Geronimo, that may be a little more friendly to you, and a little bit with you, Pep. So we have that coming up on the 18th of October. It'll be 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. I think it's in Central European time. So look out for that. And thank you all so much for joining us and for being with us for the entire day. All right. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.